This week in a new action comedy starring Dave Bautista and Kumail Nanjiani, Stuber, hits theaters, so let's talk about it. Stuber is an R-rated action comedy about a tough guy cop who has to get an Uber driver to help him catch a heroin smuggler because he had LASIK surgery earlier in the day and can't see. So as a big fan of both Dave Bautista and action movies, this one's been on my radar ever since I first saw the trailer. Be sure to tell me what you thought about it down below in the comment section, and with that said, let's get started talking about the good. And the first thing that comes to mind is that the movie's really funny. Both Dave Bautista and Kumail Nanjiani are really funny and bring kind of their own comedic personas into this film and have distinct ways that they are funny, but then as it's a buddy comedy, they have really nice chemistry and interaction with one another in the way that their personas butt heads with each other. Also, because one of the main plot lines in the film is that Dave Bautista can't see, there's all kinds of slapstick humor involving him, and it pretty much all landed for me. I never got tired of seeing him bumbling around and bumping into things or not being able to drive, but trying to anyway. It's absolutely superficial, physical comedy, but the situations, the setups are good enough, and he sells it well enough that it just landed for me. It's also an R-rated comedy, so there's no shortage of raunchy humor inside of it. That was probably my least favorite of the humor, but it definitely made me laugh at times, even when it went crass. It does a little bit of sending up of the action genre itself. Specifically, they set up some punchlines with the dialogue between Bautista and Kumail early on in the film, and they have some nice payoffs in the second half with what they do with that when it kind of goes into full action mode. So I thought that meta humor worked pretty well. Now with this movie, it's definitely comedy first, action second, but when it goes into action mode, the action is actually pretty good in the way that it's handled. They got Iko from The Raid and had him face off against Bautista, who's the big wrestler, so you kind of get some fun in having the guy that's agile and moves quickly with the guy that's just, this big mass and just throws people around. And the way that the action is shot inside of it, you can see what's happening. Even at times it does kind of handheld camera work or can go zoomed in a little bit at times, but it's done in a way that you can follow what's happening. You just feel the chaos of it. And also in some of the action sequences, there's some really cool shots. One in particular where Dave Bautista goes over kind of the ledge inside of a hotel, and it's done in a single shot. And so while it is a comedy, the action's quite good. And finally, as I've referenced multiple times before, this is an R-rated comedy and R-rated action movie, so it definitely gets crass at times. There's lots of vulgar jokes inside of it, and when someone gets shot, there's a whole bunch of blood. There's some really graphic violence inside of it, and as a fan of R-rated action movies and R-rated movies in general, I appreciate that, where these days we get a lot of PG-13 action that feels a little bit sanitized, so having an R-rated movie that's made for adults, I appreciated that about this film. With that said, let's move on to the bad. And the big thing here is that this film sticks pretty much straight to the buddy cop formula. You have a ridiculous scenario that brings two opposites together. At first, they drive each other crazy, and then in the end, they come together to catch the bad guys, and you realize that they were exactly what they needed to overcome their personal problems. This movie does not veer from the formula at all, and that's why I didn't feel like what I just said was a spoiler at all, because if you've ever seen a buddy action comedy, you pretty much know exactly when everything is going to happen and what exactly is going to happen in this movie. Other kind of problem here is that they really wasted Iko from The Raid. They got one of the top martial arts action stars of modern times, put him in this movie, and he does a little bit of cool stuff inside of it, but there's nothing really that he does that's that distinct stuff that only he can do. If you've ever seen The Raid or The Raid 2, you know that this guy is just a phenomenal talent. And here he's just, kind of a guy that's a little bit agile and does a couple of stunts here and there, but it feels like anybody could have done that. There's so much more that they could have done with his talents inside of this movie while facing off multiple times against Dave Bautista that felt a little bit like a letdown that you got Iko and you didn't get much more of what he could actually provide. Also, there's some pretty big inconsistencies in what his character is able to do. It seemed like he could just sustain any amount of damage and keep going when they needed him to escape, but then when they need him to get caught, suddenly he just kind of stops. And so it's a little bit frustrating the way that they kind of balanced out his character and the way it was kind of written. Stuber may be formulaic, but it's a very enjoyable action comedy. If you enjoy the buddy cop films of the 80s and the 90s, you should definitely give this one a try. It's a B overall, 8 out of 10 on the entertainment scale, and genre fans should check it out. So as it turns out, it's been a really good weekend for action fans. There's another new release called Point Blank that came out this weekend. That's my review. It's another throwback action film. It dropped on Netflix. Check out my review right there. Thank you for watching, and keep talking movies too much.